Hi there, and welcome to the Everyday Millionaire Podcast. My name is Patrick Francey, and I am your host, and I want to begin by saying thank you for listening. On this show, I am having conversations with seemingly ordinary individuals who have achieved some amazing and extraordinary results in both their life and business. My intention is to inspire and help you learn and grow by having my guests share their journey of how they face and overcome their challenges, but also how they celebrate their many wins. And now, let's get on with this show and have a conversation with today's guest. Hey folks, welcome to this episode of the Everyday Millionaire Mindset Matters. This is a different episode. We have a special treat in mind, which is I had a guest today for the Everyday Millionaire podcast. Of course, those of you who follow know that Steffany and I generally do Mindset Matters. But Shelly Lefkoe is one of those individuals that was on the Everyday Millionaire. And I said, you know something, this is a perfect episode for Mindset Matters. It's about beliefs. And for the past 30 years, Shelly Lefkoe has been helping people, in her words, free themselves of unwanted behavior and emotional patterns, because she believes that information and motivation isn't enough to help people change, especially when change is hard, because it generally is. So what does help people change? And the answer is finding our hidden beliefs and then changing them. And her approach is called the Lefkoe method. She's impacted over 200,000 people worldwide, which has resulted in lasting change in long-standing issues. They often say that her approach was the first one that worked for them even after they'd tried everything. So Shelly and I go down a path of unpacking beliefs. She is an expert in this area, and I thought it was perfect for Mindset Matters. So please, listen in, enjoy. Shelly Lefkoe, welcome to the Everyday Millionaire podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
You know, I always open up because as much as your bio is very comprehensive, it's never comprehensive enough. So I always open up my spots with my guests and saying, so Shelly, if I'm meeting you for the first time and I say, Shelly, what do you do? What's your answer to that question?
I help people rid themselves of unwanted behavioral and emotional patterns so they can have the life they dream of.
So that is a kind of a deep topic. It can get down and go down a lot of different paths, I'm sure. So what does that start to look like? You know, if I'm coming to you, am I coming to you to solve a problem that I've identified or that somebody's identified for me? Maybe it's my blind spot. You know, I've got this huge blind spot and I'm coming to you going, Shelly, people are telling me this. Is that kind of how that opens the conversation?
No.
How do we meet?
Rarely. I mean, sometimes I had somebody come to me and I said, what do you want to work on? And he said, I don't know. My wife said she'll divorce me if I don't work with you. I said,
okay.
that doesn't work. You have to have something you want to change. 35 years ago, my late husband created a process that is based on the premise that it's your beliefs about yourself and life, most of which are unconscious, that totally determine our behavior, our emotions, and ultimately our reality. So 35 years ago, when he created this, Patrick, people didn't know what beliefs were. They would say, you mean like religious beliefs? What do you mean? And today, everybody's talking. In fact, a movie just came out, a Pixar movie called Inside Out 2, and it's all about beliefs and how they get formed. So today, everybody knows you can't make permanent change without eliminating beliefs. And I kind of perused a little bit through some of your podcasts, and I saw a whole bunch of stuff about change is hard and change is uncomfortable and all that. And I say, maybe
Yeah, maybe. We always refer to beliefs as your BS. What's your BS? Of course, being what is your belief systems. And does it boil down to, Shelly, is if somebody's looking at some dissatisfaction in their life, whatever that might be, saying, I don't feel fulfilled in this, I'm not feeling joy, I'm not being happy. There's something going on that is like leaving me with a gap that I can't necessarily identify. Would then the question for them to be questioning my belief systems, but even that is a difficult task. So in other words, we have to, if we listen to what you've just shared, and we've got this thing happening, whatever these things are, or this thing is, we have to say, well, I wonder what my belief system is. What is it that I believe? But how do we even enter that conversation? And
Yeah.
that's, I guess, where you come in.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first thing is, I keep swearing, Patrick, that I'm going to research where belief systems come from and what that means, because I don't know what a belief system is. So and everybody says it. It's not,
Sure.
that's just what people call it. So a belief is a statement about reality that we hold as the truth. I believe this to be so. So it's not maybe, I don't know, it's a belief, right? It's the truth. A pattern is something you want to change. So a belief, getting rid of beliefs is a means to an end. The patterns are, and the distinction that I make between beliefs and patterns, because people get them mixed up all the time, and it drives me crazy because people end up trying to eliminate patterns like I'm a procrastinator or I can't lose weight, or those are patterns. So a pattern is observable. There are behavioral patterns, emotional patterns, and reality patterns. So a behavioral pattern would be, I procrastinate. I don't speak up for myself. I get into relationships that are not healthy and I stay in them. I don't put myself out there. For entrepreneurs, I just wrote a book called Hitting the Wall. And it's all about being an entrepreneur. When my husband died 30 years ago, I am a people person. I can speak, to audiences of however 1,000 people, I'm fine. I can work with people, I'm fine. But I had not a clue how to run a business. And when my husband died 8 years ago, I was left with a business to run. And I'll get back to that. So behavioral patterns is, I'm afraid to take risks. I'm afraid to take chances. For the entrepreneurs listening, there are beliefs that underlie or cause those patterns. And when you eliminate, and I use my words very carefully, when you eliminate the beliefs, the patterns disappear. An emotional pattern would be, I feel anxious all the time, or I'm depressed, or I have an anger issue. Those are emotional patterns, and there are beliefs and conditionings under that. A reality pattern is the last thing we work on, but I do all the right things and it never turns out for me. I sabotage myself. There's usually a behavioral aspect to that. But, if things are going well and I'm making a lot of money and everything's going well, I do something to kill it.
Mm-hmm.
That could be behavioral, but it could be a reality pattern. I never have what I want, no matter what. So we get rid of the patterns by identifying the beliefs and eliminating them. Now, you asked a good question, and I talked about this yesterday on a podcast. You need to be trained to learn how to do what I do. Now, I'm going to leave you with an opportunity to do it for free, and I'm going to give you a tool that can help later. But for right now, I'm not going to give you like a trick, like here's how to eliminate a belief, because my experience is looking in a mirror and saying, I'm good enough, I'm good enough, I'm good enough, or all the other kind of tricks, talk yourself out of it, just tell yourself it's not true. For my money, don't work. And if they work, you have to do them all the time and it's exhausting. So I am going to explain how you get rid of a belief, why it's so difficult to get rid of a belief. And I can tell you how to do it, but it's an art. It's like you have to find the specific beliefs that underlie a specific pattern. And there is only one pattern that has the same beliefs for everybody. And that's fear of public speaking.
Interesting. That one is the one that shows up all of the time. I remember back in my days, 25 years ago, just how afraid of public speaking I was. It shut me down. It was the most difficult thing I had ever had to lean into, and I avoided it for years. And then I got into a position where I had no choice, and it was painful. This many years later, I've been on stage thousands of times and done all of it, but it took a long time for me to get past it and then to be able to public speak. So it's interesting. That's based on your research, and it's certainly a common theme. They say that the one thing that people fear more than death is, in fact, public speaking. We live in that world. It's interesting, Shelly, is that we live in that world. I'm not sure that we see that same pattern or same thing anymore, because to us it's pretty normal. But I guess what you're saying is that you continue to see that as an issue. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. And here's the thing. Fear is always caused by a real or imagined threat to your survival.
Mm-hmm.
So underlying fear is always a real or imagined threat to your survival, right? When you speak in public, there is no threat to your survival. So what are you afraid of? You're not afraid of public speaking. You're afraid of what people are going to think about you. You're afraid of criticism and judgment. You're afraid of not living up to the expectations of others. You're afraid of rejection. So those are the fears. It's not public speaking. It's mostly. So there's 11 beliefs that underlie fear of public speaking. But the big one is, I'll back up. Everybody pretty much, I say pretty much not to lose my credibility, but everybody has the belief I'm not good enough. That's almost always the first belief I start with. So you get rid of I'm not good enough. Core beliefs like self-esteem beliefs. I'm not good enough. I'm not important. I'm not worthy. I don't matter. I'm not smart.
Not smart enough, not tall enough, not thin enough. It's just a whole conversation of not enoughs.
Right. So those are the core beliefs. The way that we keep those down and out of our faces is what we call survival strategy beliefs. So it's what makes me good enough is, or in order to survive, I must. And what makes me good enough is having other people think well of me is the belief that ran my life. What does this one think? What does that one think? Am I wearing the right thing? Did I say the right thing? Did they like me? Was I invited? It was this constant blah, 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 blah in my head. And when that belief went away, I was able to be my authentic self wherever I am. And what I loved about it was my focus is now off me. I'm good. Like, I'm okay. I'm not perfect. You have, feedback from me. I'm very open, but I no longer question my okayness, my good enoughness, if you will. And so my focus is not on me, it's on you. It's on service. It's on your audience. It's on making a difference. And so I have freedom to be my authentic self. And what I tell people is, interestingly enough, it's what I think people love about me, that, what you see is what you never walk away from me saying, wonder what she really thinks.
Mm-hmm.
And when I spoke in Moscow right before the pandemic, I got to speak in Moscow. And when I got off the stage, everybody kind of surrounded me. And it was spectacularly moving when this first woman said to me, I never saw anybody express themselves like you.
Mm.
I want that for my child, and I want that for myself. And I was so moved because I always say, what you do interests people. Who you are inspires them.
Mm-hmm.
Your challenges, your genuineness, your who you are, how you be in the world, that you're present for people, you listen to people, you're kind, you're caring. Nobody gives a shit how much money you make. Not interesting. So I think what my work does is it gives people the opportunity to be free, to be your authentic self.
It's permission to be authentic with a fundamental understanding, I guess, in behind it, Shelly, is that not everybody's going to like us. Like attracts like. That phrase is true for everybody. And so when you can be your authentic self, you will, in fact, align with others who
Yes.
share common values, share common beliefs. I like the point that you made that really beliefs aren't a system. They're just beliefs. They're your truth, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Now, there's something that I come back to that's interesting is that I think that I see often that we discuss is that you're not necessarily aware of your beliefs. So first off, you have to first identify, okay, there's some level of dissatisfaction I have in my life, some gap, whether that be I need to public speak, I can't, I've got fear of that. I mean, there's lots of training for that, those kinds of things. But underlying all of that has to be the identification of that belief. So in other words, we first have to say, oh, maybe it's one of my beliefs that's stopping me from, and I'm getting in my own way, because we ultimately all are. But I'm thinking about from that individual who's trying to figure out what it is. And so the first step in all of that, I think, has to be, and what's your thoughts on this, Shelly? The first step in all of this is that you have to be aware of your thinking. So in other words, you have to have some level of awareness of your thought process to identify what those beliefs are. Like you have to unpack going, why is it that this is happening to me? And I'll share a quick story back to something that you said earlier. I once had a young lady working for me, but there was always some drama in her life. Something was always going wrong. And I sat down with her, kind of took coach position and kind of started having these conversations with her. And I go, geez, you always, there's always something going on for you. What is this all about? And she goes, I don't know. My dad always told me, he always said to me, Teresa, if it wasn't for bad luck, you wouldn't have any luck at all. And I went, oh, okay. Let's start there.
Yep.
Can you imagine being wired that way at an early age where your father figure is actually saying to you, if it wasn't for bad luck, you wouldn't have any luck at all. Okay, well, there's a belief that's implanted that needs to be unpacked. Would that be a fair kind of entry point for somebody that you're speaking with?
Very, very. So I want to I'm going to give you some rules to live by in this interview. And one of them is, why is a terrible question. Why do I have problems in business? Well, my father went out of business when I was a kid. So that you're talking about awareness. So yes, awareness is the first step, no question. But awareness in and of itself is not powerful. Why is a terrible question? Because A, it's made up. Why is meaning? Meaning is always made up. And even if you knew why, now what? A very powerful question is what, right? What might I believe? What did I conclude? What can I do about something? What is one thing so it's a better question. So let's start with unpacking beliefs. So how a belief gets formed. We come into this world, we don't know if we're good enough or not. We don't know if life is hard or easy. We don't know anything. We're just these little, what I call balls of consciousness. And we come into a family, and it could be two moms, two dads, a mom and a dad, a single mom, whatever it is. And do you have kids, Patrick?
I have a 40-year-old daughter and two grandchildren. So, yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So if you remember back to when our kids were little, they come into the world and they want three things. They want affection, they want attention, they want acknowledgement. And then they start asking a one-word question every day, all day. What's the question they ask?
Why?
Why? Nobody ever gets that wrong. It's really interesting. Why? Why are my parents so annoyed with me? Why are they yelling at me? Why can't I live up to their expectations? I guess I'm not good enough. Why are they working all the time and busy all the time? And why are they looking at their iPhone while I'm talking to them? Oh, I guess what I have to say is not important. I guess I'm not important. Why don't I get kisses and hugs? I guess I'm not lovable. Why are they always complaining about money and scared about paying the bills? Well, I guess money is scarce and hard to get. So this is how our beliefs get formed. And here's the reason why they stay with us throughout our lives and why it feels like it's so hard to get rid of them. Because we think we saw our beliefs in the world, and it is impossible to not believe something you think you saw. I saw I'm not good enough. I saw life is hard. I saw money is scarce and hard to get. I saw people can't be trusted because your parents are people to children, and people is 9 billion, but not to us. So anything you can see, so most of you are not watching, but I'm holding up a pink water bottle, okay? Anything you can see, if you look at anything in your room, everybody look at something in your room, something you can see. It has a color, a shape, and a location. You cannot see a belief. So you see mom and dad criticizing you. You see them worried about money and complaining all the time. You see they make promises to you and don't keep them. But you can't see people can't be trusted.
So when if we can't see a belief, we still, there's some, at some point we have to have, do you agree, or your thought process around, there has to be some point where we're self-analyzing, when we're looking at it going, okay, we're not blaming somebody outside of us. There's a phrase in a program called Hoffman where, it's everybody's fault, but nobody's to blame. But at the first point of all of what you're talking about, we get wired from our parents. And this is just one example, one conversation. But how do we enter that? If we can't see a belief, then we have to ask ourselves. So there's a phrase that, the quality of your life is a reflection of the quality of the questions you ask, back to your point, which is why is probably not the best question. The better question is what, or the better question is how,
Right.
So these are entry points into it. So how does somebody bring their awareness to it? Do they first start by going, okay, I'm always bumping up against the ceiling of limitation in my income? That if I'm not blaming my employer, if I'm not blaming the economy, if I'm not blaming the government, and I'm taking responsibility for the result that I'm getting that I'm not happy with, then I have to ask myself a different set of questions. Is that a fair assessment of what you're saying, Shelly?
Yes, very well done. And my very close friends own Hoffman. So
There you go.
I'm familiar. So the way that you start to unpack a belief, and this is how my late husband actually created the process. He was looking at what was it that was causing him, and he had a reality pattern. Things were supposed to turn out, and they just never did. They would fall through at the last minute. And he was on a plane going to California from New York, and he started looking at, what is causing this? And he came up with the belief, I'm someone who overcomes obstacles. So somebody who believes that is who they are, that like what makes me worthy of, I can't remember the words, was overcoming obstacles. And he saw himself as that was what he was known for, Morty, he never gives up, So somebody who believes what makes me worthy is overcoming obstacles creates obstacles to overcome, right? So if you look at what must somebody, and we have a program, we have trainings where we teach people how to do this. And in the first one, we teach you how to eliminate a belief. The second one is how to actually find a pattern and find the specific beliefs. But it's almost logical, okay? So what must I believe? What would someone, take yourself out of the equation, what would someone have to believe to not speak up, right? And then you can ask yourself, what would I have to believe in order to speak up? Well, I'd have to believe that my voice is important, that people will hear me, that what I say matters, that I matter. So you have to kind of do a little, detective work. They used to call me a belief detective. And you want to look at the specific belief that underlies, because we all have millions of beliefs, but the ones that underlie a specific pattern. So it's logical. It's, if I don't speak up, I must believe that either no one's going to listen or what I have to say is not important or I'm not important. If I am afraid to take risks, what do people believe who take risks? Well, they believe that there's no such thing as mistakes and failures. There's only outcomes, as Tony Robbins says. They believe that if you're not failing a lot, you're going to be mediocre, like Richard Branson believes, right? Larry Page and Sergey Brin were quoted as saying, we wish we could start our own schools because kids come out of school afraid to make mistakes and fail, and you can't work for Google if you're afraid to fail. So I must believe that mistakes and failures are bad. And for entrepreneurs listening, that is, you could read every business book as I did. And until I got rid of the belief, it didn't matter that I knew every quote about why mistakes and failures are not bad. I had to get rid of the belief. If I make a mistake or fail, I'll be rejected. So there's now fear. Those are also underlying fear of public speaking. Mistakes and failures are bad. If I make a mistake or fail, I'll be rejected. And it's so interesting. I was working with years ago, we had fear of public speaking as a niche because we could get rid of it so fast that we did it like a party trick.
Yeah.
And then I just couldn't do it one more time because it's the same beliefs every time. And I got very bored. So we stopped promoting it as a niche. But I had a fear of public speaking client, and his dad, when he was a kid, if he made a mistake or failed to do what his father wanted, he would stop talking to him for days. So I was getting rid of the belief with him, if I make a mistake or fail, I'll be rejected. And he kept saying, we got to the part of the process, which is almost at the end. Doesn't it seem like you saw that? He said, I did see it. I saw it every day of my life. And I said, but did you see in the future, if I make a mistake or fail, I will be rejected? Can you see I will be? And he kept saying, but I did see it, but I did see it. And finally, I saw my father stop talking to me when I didn't do what he wanted. If you're watching a video, that is seeable.
Mm-hmm.
Where was anytime I make a mistake or fail, I'll be rejected? He goes, that was in my mind. I made that up. Poof, belief goes away. Now there's more we do, but for now, the belief goes away. So the next day, he goes to do his presentation and he makes a mistake and somebody points it out. And he says, oh, what's the right answer? And the guy tells him, he says, everybody listen up. What I just said was wrong. What Charlie said was right. He said, Charlie, can you please repeat what you said? Because I wouldn't have wanted anybody to walk out of here with the wrong information. So thank you for speaking up. He's walking back to his office. He's confident. He feels great. And he goes into his office and the phone is ringing. And it's the executive vice president of his company. And he says, I was in the room when you made that mistake. I was so impressed with how you handled it. I'm putting you up for a promotion.
Wow.
He said, Shelly, I didn't get rejected. I got promoted.
Oh, the stories we tell ourselves that get in our way. There's something I'd like to unpack a little bit deeper, Shelly, based on your expertise. You know, myself, having coached so many entrepreneurs and real estate investors, given what I do with the Real Estate Investment Network, et cetera, one of the beliefs when we sometimes get into the conversation, you identified it, is that when we start to unpack, well, what is the fear, for example, as we start to go through the layers, somebody will ultimately say, well, there's a fear of failure. I have this huge fear of failure. And the realization that I've come to for myself, and something you said, though, makes me go, okay, we need to go a little deeper on that, is that, no, you're not really, the fear of failure is not really what it is in the context that you're saying it. The fear of failure is actually the fear of judgment of peers, of friends, of family, of whatever it might be. That's the bigger fear, not the fear of, because rarely when we do an initiative is there a catastrophic failure. It's generally, we tried this particular tactic or this particular strategy, it didn't work. That is then putting us out into the workforce, if you will, or the workplace, where we could be judged by friends, by family. I think that's what gets in people's way. But there's something behind all of that, which is the belief of that's what's going to happen. So in other words, I'm not quite sure what I'm trying to point out is that the fear of failure is a real common one, but it's not enough to just say, I fear failure. It is, what's the underlying belief of that fear, which I'll be judged, or my dad won't talk to me, or, somebody will fire me. There's the underlying issue is not the fear of failure. It's the consequences in your mind of that failure. Am I articulating that in a way that it kind of opens up for you to kind of go a little bit?
It's interesting. Rarely does anybody ask me a question that I have to actually think about in a podcast. So that's very provocative. I have a lot to unpack about that. But so we do something called conditioning. So it's a little process that's based on the Pavlov's dog experiment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if everybody wants to do this with me, I'm going to do this very fast, okay? So let's assume you have a fear of failure. Failure does not cause fear in people. The people I mentioned and the people who write the books don't have a fear of failure. But here's what happens when you're little. Just like the food and the bell, if everybody knows the Pavlov's dog experiment, right? Every time failure is present when you're little, there is some sort of anger or withdrawal from a parent. So that when a parent gets angry, you feel unloved by the person on whom your survival depends. Some people get hit when they fail to follow the rules or do what their parents want. Hitting is a threat to your survival as a child, right? So every time failure is present, everybody close your eyes who has this. Every time failure is present, there is a perceived threat to your survival, feeling unloved by the people on whom your survival depends or getting hit. It is the perceived threat to your survival that causes the fear, not the failure. Failure is only present. And as a child, we never make this distinction in our brain. So they get together. So now every time failure is present, fear is present. But if you make the distinction that it wasn't the failure that caused the fear, it was the threat to your survival, the fear will go away. Now, I'm going to say both to the answer to your question. If you have a belief mistakes and failures are bad, that's a belief, and you need to get rid of it. We also have a fear associated with being criticized and judged. We have a fear associated with not living up to the expectations of others. We have a fear of rejection. And those three things cause fear of public speaking, cause you to be afraid to launch your product because you're afraid of being judged.
Mm-hmm.
You're afraid of not, when we get rid of that, and that was my late husband's true genius, this stimulus process, we get rid of those things very quickly. And when you get rid of them, this is all in my book, Hitting the Wall, Eliminate the Beliefs That Sabotage Your Business and Your Life, that takes you through these processes. I'm going to give you an opportunity to eliminate a belief for free, and I'll tell you where to go in a little bit. But the stimulus process is also in the book. And when you have to get rid of all the beliefs that underlie, and there's not a million. I always say, give me 10 sessions, I'll give you your life.
Yeah.
It's not that something is underlying the fear of failure. There's yes, and. So there is stuff, and you still have to get rid of the belief that failure is bad and the fear of failure in and of itself.
Yeah, there's a part of it that is so over the years, and I'll just share this with you, then we'll kind of go down this path a little bit. I want to share a couple things. Number one, with the podcast, The Everyday Millionaire, the theme around it was, seemingly ordinary individuals achieving extraordinary results. And so, I ask a lot of questions of the guests on the show, and they've achieved a lot, and they've accomplished, many of them, a lot of things. And when I start to dig into, one of the questions I often ask is, are you a result of nature or a result of nurture? So in other words, did your parents, were they entrepreneurial? How did they support you? Because often many of these things, I'll say most of these things, go back to something in your life that happens. There's that negative love syndrome where from 0 to probably somewhere in that puberty range, all we're wanting from our parents is love. That's it. Our parents, without knowing it, give us seemingly conditional love, which is, when you behave, I love you more. When you do this, I love you more. When you don't, and if you screw up, some parents are shining a light on it. You made a mistake, you screwed up. And so we have all these stories around it, and it seems like love is conditional. So it kind of plays a little bit into what you said. And this is what I see personally when I'm working with individuals. But here's the thing about it, is that as I've spoke with so many of my guests, something that I see in a pattern of those individuals is their parents, where I've even had many of them say, their parents were supportive almost to a fault. So in other words, failure was not even a thing. It was like, get up, try it again, dust yourself off, go. You got this. You can do this. They would come up with some crazy idea, and their parents would go, that's a great idea, as ridiculous as it was. And so it's interesting is that so much of what we believe comes from how we were raised. And then that, without, again, it's everybody's fault, but nobody's to blame. Those same individuals say, well, I came from an abusive family and I grew up thinking I am never, ever going to be that way. Or they came from a poor family going, I will never be this broke in my life. So there's a whole different belief or set of beliefs that they grew up with that shifted the trajectory for how they interact in the world today. Now, where am I going with all this? Is when we look at how we're bumping up against what we want to achieve. So there's this ceiling of limitations that and I'm not saying everybody's this way, because I think it's mostly A-type personalities, right? It's like, I want more, I want to achieve more, I want to be more, I want to show up better, I want to be a better leader. So at some point we hit this ceiling and we go, we can't bust through this ceiling. So then that's where it comes to, okay, this has to be about me. We have to first have that realization, not blaming anything else. What is it in me, or what is it around my belief? So then we reach out to somebody like you who says, okay, let me support you around this ceiling of limitation that you seem to have. And whether that's fear of failure, fear of public speaking, limiting belief around how much money I can earn and how hard I have to work, or my wife and I, for example, Steffany just creates magic. It's like unbelievable what she's created. I've witnessed it as her husband over 30 years of being with her. And I often shake my head because I'm the guy that believes we have to work hard to be rewarded for that. So I'm a work guy. She's a have more, work less kind of gal. And so she creates from a whole different place and has done some amazing things in her life. So do you see the differentiation? So is there, when you're having a conversation with a client and you're seeing this, is that where you're entering the conversation? Is that you're listening to them to unpack their beliefs, or do you go right into it and say, okay, let's see what you believe? Or how is that process for you in terms of when you're asking questions?
You started that journey you just went on with the question, is it nature or nurture?
Yes.
So I want to first address that, if I may, and then I'll answer your question that you just asked.
It was a long question. I get it. And there was a lot around it, Shelly. So I do get it.
That's okay. That's all right. So the first question, is it nature or nurture? I'm a nurture girl. You know, you come into the world, you may be full of piss and vinegar. And yes, you may be one of those people who say, I will never be like my parents. And actually stick to that. You know, maybe there's some nurture. I think there's some way in which we come into the world. My kids, most of us who have more than one kid, our kids are very different. You know, I used to try all these parenting techniques with my first child, and everything worked, and it was magic and easy. And then my second child came along, and it was like, yeah, no. So, you know, she was very different to parent. So there's an aspect of nature, but ultimately it's nurture. It is what happens to this child. What's the environment in which they are being raised? And I agreed with everything you said from Huffman and from whatever, all the statements you made. You didn't say anything that, you know, tweaked me, which is unusual. So that was great. People come to me and they say, there is something in my life I want to change. My late husband used to say, the only time our process doesn't work is if somebody doesn't want to change. You know, so you don't have to know how to change. You don't have to, but you have to not want to, like, if you don't want to, I won't. You have to say, there is something in my life that I want to be different. Otherwise, So if you say, I don't speak up for myself. I say, okay, what emotions do you feel? And I get the behavior, I get the emotions. I look at, is it an avoidance pattern? Is it I just kind of look at what's happening, right? Is it a habitual pattern? Is it a driven pattern? That's a survival strategy. So people come to me with issues. I have an anger problem. Underlying anger, everyone, whatever anybody else tells you, trust me on this. Underlying anger is powerlessness. Because if you could do something about it, you would just do something about it. We get angry because we feel powerless. So if I'm working with somebody who has an anger issue, and we go back to their childhood, usually they came from an either my way or the highway. There was some situation that you couldn't, as a child, impact. Mostly it's I couldn't get my needs met. My parents worked all the time, or they were busy all the time, and my father was never home, and I was powerless to do anything about that. My father hit my mother, and I was powerless to do anything about that. My parents had no money and they struggled. I was powerless to do anything about that. I got bullied. So those are places where children would conclude, I'm powerless. Then every time something happens that you can't impact, you just get angry, right? So that's now a very important point. You keep saying, Patrick, what is the belief? And everybody says that. There isn't one belief that causes a pattern. There's a bunch, which is why I always say, I'll do the minimum I will do is 5 sessions. Because if I do one session with somebody, I'll do it. It doesn't have integrity because you're not going to get rid of the pattern.
Sure.
People say, oh my God, I got rid of the belief I'm not good enough and I feel amazing. That's nice, but nothing's going to change unless you get rid of the other beliefs that caused the problem, right? And, people might say, I took a chance, I took a risk, I got rid of mistakes and failures are bad. That could be life-changing, but it's unlikely that it will get rid of the whole pattern, right? So the problems that people come to me with are entrepreneurs, I can't fire anybody. Well, what do you believe that has you, what would happen if you fired somebody? Well, I wouldn't be liked. Oh, and what would that mean? Well, that means that what makes me good enough is being liked. So every time I'm not liked, my I'm not good enough comes in. Or people pleasing. I have to please people in order to survive or in order to be okay. So that's underlying why an entrepreneur, then there could be other beliefs, what else do entrepreneurs? They're afraid to make mistakes and fail, afraid to launch their products because they're going to get criticized or judged. So people aren't going to think well of them. My book has all the entrepreneur patterns. I had a client who had a job. He was doing well, but he always wanted to start his own business. And like you said before, his father used to say, having a job is secure, having your own business is dangerous. And he saw his father go bankrupt. So we got rid of the belief that having a job is secure and being an entrepreneur is dangerous. And a couple of other beliefs I don't remember. And he called me 10 years later and he said, well, Shell, my business is worth $12 million and I want to buy my partner out and I'm scared to do it. So we worked on that. So in answer to your question, Patrick, people come to me when they feel stuck in whatever area. I'm not eating well. I'm not taking care of myself. What must you believe? Now, here's an interesting point about beliefs. We all know. So let me make the assertion. Evidence doesn't get rid of beliefs, and information doesn't make a difference. So we all know that if we eat well and exercise and get a good night's sleep, we will have a better quality of life and maybe live longer. We all know that sugar is poison. We all know that processed food is bad for you. This is not controversial anymore. And yet, most people eat it. They eat crap. And this is the body that's going to take us through our entire lives. And we don't eat well. We don't exercise. Now, I have a belief that being young and vibrant and fit and healthy will give me the quality of life that I want. Because I have that belief, when I go to Hawaii, so my daughter lives in Hawaii, and my daughter says, "Do you want to go for a hike?" I don't say how long, how high, how far. I just say yes, right? I play pickleball almost every morning, and if I can, every night. I lift weights. I do yoga. And you can't see me, but I'm not young. I'm over 65. And I will do this until I can't, which will hopefully be when I'm in the ground or wherever I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
Our beliefs determine how we take care of ourselves, and the knowledge doesn't make a difference.
It's so true, isn't it? There's something that you started early on, a comment that you made that kind of plays into this as well, which is, first off, many people say they want to change. But what's really often in behind that is my experience is that they want change. They want things to be different, but they don't want to have to change in order to achieve it, which of course is that definition of insanity. But there has to be that willingness to first identify the fact that I want change. I want my life to be different. I want it to be whatever that might be. I want some change in my life, whether that's degree of happiness, significance. I want more money. There's whatever that is, but the realization has to be that I'm going to have to change. In behind all that, of course, means that there's a fallout when you change. And I'd like you to kind of comment on this, because I believe this is one of the fundamental things that get in people's way, is that as they start to change who they are, because it's not about the outcome, it's about the shift of who you have to be to achieve that outcome. So in other words, I want to bust through my belief around money or my belief about whatever it might be. That means that I have to start to shift how I show up, how I occur. And that may include losing or shifting some relationships that you have in your life. Because as you start to change, people will start to fall away. Then that's where the fear comes in. Who am I if I'm not that? Well, what if I offend my friend, my family, and then they don't want to hang out with me, and I don't want to lose those friends? So there's a lot of things that go on I guess mentally. There's a lot of things that have to kind of unfold in order to make those changes. So my observation, I like your comment as well, Shelly, is that the resistance to do this body of work comes in the form of, what will the fallout be? Maybe not directly they think that, but there is, like,
Yeah.
if you're in a toxic relationship or you're attracting toxic relationships, there's a big belief somewhere in behind that, or series of beliefs, to your point.
Yes.
And that means that as you change who you are to achieve that outcome, because that's always what it is, there could be some fallout. What's your thoughts on that, Shelly?
Yeah. So one of the things I tell people, I'm going to give you a diagram. Again, you can't see me, but if you could, I would have a pad with a box on it. Okay. A belief is a box. inside the box, people can't be trusted. Trusting people so I'm making X's. There's a lot of possibilities inside that box: working alone, keeping your distance, not having too many friends, don't tell people things. Those are all possibilities inside the box. People can't be trusted. Having a lot of close personal friends, not a possibility inside that box. When you do my work, you eliminate the box. Now, you're still going to choose based on your situation or your desire in the moment. So I was working with somebody who was sexually abused when she was a kid. And she was getting rid of the belief, this was 30 years ago, men can't be trusted. You can't trust men. And the belief was just about to go away. I asked her the $64,000 question, did you ever see all men can't be trusted? And she said, Shelly, I don't want to get rid of this belief because then I'm going to trust all men and then I can get, abused again. And I said, no. The difference when you get rid of the belief is you just have a choice. Right now, you have no choice. So you still might look at a guy and say, this guy looks kind of shady. I'm not going to trust him. That's a possibility. But you can also say, this guy looks like the real deal. I'm going to trust him. So the fallout, as you say, there's not a specific thing that's going to happen after you eliminate these beliefs. You now have choice. And once the beliefs go away, Patrick, I'm telling you, things that you think you cared about, you don't. The things that you were terrified of, you're not. And the change is so natural that very often I say from session to session, I'll say to somebody, what'd you notice this week? And they'll go, one guy said, well, I don't know that I noticed anything. Oh, he says, I was at a party and I was talking to this guy and I said, wait a minute, let's back up. You tell me you don't go to parties and if you do, you don't talk to people. And he goes, oh, yeah, oh my God. It's just because the little voice so let's assume you have a belief what I have to say is not important and people aren't interested in what I have to say. Okay. Those are two common beliefs. So you're sitting in a meeting and you want to say something and you go, nah, don't say it. Nobody cares or nobody's going to listen or not important. And that voice is there. So you're aware of it. When the beliefs go away, you're sitting in the meeting and all of a sudden you go, well, wait a minute. I don't agree with that. Here's how I see it. You are not aware of the absence of something. You're only aware of the presence of something. That's why the change happens and you don't even realize there's been a change because there's an absence of the voice that's telling you not to, or what if, or oh my God, or you're going to fail, or that voice is just quiet.
I love it. Shelly, I'm going to and I know we're a little pressed for time, but I want to say something and then I want to kind of start to go a slightly different direction in our conversation. And you know what? I often use a comment that our life is a reflection of our values, whatever values that we believe. So yeah. I'm going to unpack that a little bit more. And so our life is a reflection of our values, our core values, our highest values. And then it's also a reflection of the decisions we make or the decisions we don't make, which are still a decision. That's a decision.
Yep.
But those decisions are based on our core values. But what you've pointed out to me today, which I've been stepping over, which I know, which is our life is a reflection of our beliefs. And those beliefs can be, and our values are also driven by those beliefs. So when we get behind it and we start to kind of look at it. So my point is this, is if we look at our life and we say, my life sucks, or whatever story we have, or this part of my life sucks, or my business sucks, or my relationships suck, or my social life, whatever we're dissatisfied with, I'll put it in that, I'll use that phrase. We start to then say, well, if that's the case, if our life is a reflection of our decisions or indecisions or a reflection of our values, but we add to that, oh, at its very core, our life is a reflection of our beliefs. Would that be a accurate statement from your perspective?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this question. Now, this is where I want to diverge from that statement, which is this, Shelly, is that here you are today, mature, accomplished. What have you discovered, or what do you continue to discover? So in my world, I'm 65 plus. I look at it, and this body of work for me, in terms of my own development, my own personal and professional development, it's just, I'm always in it. I'm always looking. I'm always searching. How do I, turn my current ceiling of limitation into my floor? How do I keep evolving and shifting? Now you're taking this whole body of work on over the years. There's two parts I'd like to know is, do you continue to do this for you? Are you always reflecting and examining? And a bigger question, I guess, is, was that nature or nurture? How did you go and come to be on this journey? So part one, do you always and continue to do the body of work to this day? And then how did you get on this journey? When did it start for you? Was there a fork in the road moment?
Oh, there sure was. In answer to your first question, I have a belief that while growth, for me, it's everything in life. If you're not growing, you're standing still, So I always want to be growing. I'm always kind of reflective, but I don't want to spend my life working on myself. I'm not interested.
Yeah.
I think we come into this life and it's short, and I want to leave looking back going, she came, she had a blast, and she's out of here. I heard a belief you have, you have to work hard to get ahead. I don't have that belief. In some ways it's good, in some ways
Phew, you're so fortunate. You're so fortunate.
yeah, no, I definitely do not have that belief. So I don't think people should spend their lives working on themselves.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I do love about my work is that you handle stuff, So
Mhm.
it's not like I'm perfect. It's not like I have nothing to work on, but rarely do things come up. And if they do, I'll work on them. Right. So we have a process we haven't talked about yet, which I'm going to give you a little trick at the end. It's very, very powerful and life-changing. And I've practiced that a lot, which is how to get rid of a negative emotion in the moment. And that's used the word occurring. That's the occurring course that we teach. So that was the first question. The second question is, how did I come to this? So I did something many, many years ago called the EST training. And I realized that personal growth and transformation was like a thing. And because I was very, very blessed, Patrick. I had a wonderful childhood. Not perfect. My father was like, he's your head. And, I had beliefs just like everybody else. But I had two very, very, very loving parents. So I was one of the very few, very blessed, and I'm grateful every minute of every day of my life for my parents. And my mother did too much for me, so I concluded I'm not capable. So again, I had lots of beliefs. But how I came into this was I met my husband at EST, and he was struggling and created this process. And he comes home and he said, "Shell, I want you to see he said." He was very humble. He said it came through him. And he did it with somebody. He did the belief process with somebody. And I watched him do it. And I swear to God, you guys, I was hit by a bolt of lightning that just went, oh my God, that's what I'm here to do. That is why I'm on this earth. It was like something I will never forget as long as I live. It was just a defining moment in my life where I just went, that's why I'm here. I'm here to do that. And I've been doing it for 35 years. And I'm never not in awe of the power of this process, ever.
So I'm trying to think of who I've lost the name of Esk originally. Did Esk not then go on to be Landmark? I
Yes,
may be
yes.
mixing. Yeah.
Honor Earhart.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, there. Yes, that's exactly. Yeah, that's the name. So we probably know a number of people that we've crossed paths with over the
We sure
years. So
do.
that's great. We can have that conversation
At
off
the
air.
end. Yeah.
So walk us through that exercise, if you don't mind. So I want to just qualify something. I think I agree with you that it's not a case of always working on yourself. I would kind of put it in a space of being aware of what your blind spots are, being aware of what's getting in your way. I'm very clear on my purpose. Be your greatest self, live your best life that's kind of my mantra. Be a contribution. I'm driven by purpose and mission to support the success of others and the
Beautiful.
self-discovery. I know that the minute I'm just thinking about me, I'm bored and bummed out. I have to be a contribution to others. I know that about myself. It
Yes.
just comes to me naturally. So
Yeah.
the self-reflection that I have is not from a place of criticism, but it's more of criticizing myself. Although that happens, I certainly, though, am in self-reflective of, am I actually being my greatest self? Am I doing the best I can? Am I getting in my own way of being my greatest self, if you will? So that's kind of where that comes from. And I don't dwell on it, but I'm always having that self-awareness because too, I think as we have conversations with others, as I have a conversation with you, for example, it's like, oh, as much as I have talked about beliefs, Steffany and I on our Mindset Matters podcast have entered that conversation, there's always a little bit more. And I go, oh, there's something to learn from all of this, isn't there? So you were saying about an exercise that you'd like to share with the audience. Can we do that now? Because I'm kind of sitting on the edge of my seat going, okay, tell me, give me that secret sauce, please.
And I call it being conscious, right? So I am interested in meeting a man for my second act, right? And one of these and this should be for everybody who wants a relationship in life, to be with someone who's conscious and awake. And what you described, Patrick, is conscious. I'm awake. How am I being? Who am I being? Am I living consistent with my values? Right? A good example, and then I'm going to give you the process. So I'm at pickleball, and there's this man who's so awful that somebody actually took a paddle and hit him on the head and he bled. I mean, true story. And pickleball people are the nicest people in the whole world. And I played with him, and he's a miserable man. But I started making him wrong like everybody else did. And then I stopped and said, don't ask what's wrong with this man. Ask what happened to this man. What happened?
Great question.
To this man that's making him be this way? And then I have compassion as opposed to make wrong. That's conscious. That's being awake. That's who I want to be with in a man. Somebody like you, conscious, who will walk away going, I shouldn't have said that. Not that we're perfect, but we're aware. And that's what happened. I was bad-mouthing the guy, and I went, Shelly, that's not who you are. Who you are has compassion for this guy. What happened to him? Okay. So beliefs, if you want to get rid of a belief, go to eliminatebeliefs.com. Okay. Eliminatebeliefs.com. You can eliminate one of the 3 most common beliefs for free. However, what causes all of your feelings are the meaning you give events.
Mm.
All of your feelings come from the meaning you give events. Okay. Now, I know you're all very conscious who's listening, and some of your heads might explode when I say this, but I'll explain it. Events have no inherent meaning.
They don't.
Meaning is in your mind. It's not in the events. Meaning is in your mind, not in the events. And again, this is all in my book, Hitting the Wall. Meaning is in your mind. So whenever you have a negative emotion, okay, and when people say to me, oh, there's no negative emotions. Well, if you want to walk around feeling angry, depressed, sad, anxious, knock yourself out. I have no interest. Feel it, have a moment, great, then get rid of it. Okay, so here's how you get rid of it. You ask yourself the question, right? After you get angry, upset, anxious, whatever you feel. I'll talk to the entrepreneurs in the audience. The deal fell through. Oh God, you start to get panicky. Stop. And there's 6 ways to do this. We teach it in a course. I'm going to give you 2 ways. First one, my way. What happened? The deal fell through. What meaning did I give it? Business is going to go under. What else could it mean? There's a better deal coming tomorrow. What does it really mean? What do I know for sure? Nothing. The other way to do it is, what happened? The deal fell through. What meaning did I give it? We're going to have a bad quarter. Where is that meaning? The meaning is in my mind. It's not in the events. You don't know what kind of quarter you're going to have because that deal fell through. So the fact that events have no inherent meaning is to say we don't know anything for sure because something happened. My husband died. That doesn't mean I'm going to starve to death or be alone for the rest of my life. Or those are all the meanings that when he died, I went, oh God, I don't know how to run a business, right? So now I'm panicky. Now I don't want to get out of bed. And then I said, well, could mean you're going to starve to death. And it could mean you're going to step up and learn, which I did. And 8 years later, we're doing okay, right? We're doing really well. So the fact that he died didn't mean I was going to starve to death. Now, are there consequences? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of consequences to his death or to the quarter or to the whatever happened, but there's no meaning. We don't know anything for sure about the future because something happened. My spouse came home and didn't kiss me hello. They don't love me anymore. They're having an affair. What else could it mean? He had a hard day. What does it really mean? Nothing. There's no inherent meaning in events. So meaning comes from beliefs. If you believe people can't be trusted and your husband comes home late, you're going to think, oh my God, you're going to give it the meaning he's having an affair. So if you get rid of the beliefs, you won't give that meaning. However, stuff happens, things happen in the moment, and you just get like, oh no, things I could tell 50 stories where something happened and I went, oh, that's going to, and then I said, okay, the fact that that's happening has no meaning. I come up with one other meaning just to shift it. And then the emotion just goes away. Golf. Use it in golf. For those of you who golf, you miss a putt or a shot or whatever. I'm not a golfer. And you go, oh God, I suck, or I'm a lousy chipper, or I can't, putt or whatever. And then it could mean that. It could mean you had a bad shot or a bad hole. But the fact, it doesn't mean your game is going to suck. The event has no meaning. I don't know anything about your next hole because this one sucked. And golfers tell me it's a game changer.
It's interesting that when we look at all of these things, and unpack them, it's a lot of it goes back to, the age-old stoicism, doesn't it? Which is something's happened to me. What can I control? And really, ultimately, so many things that happen outside of our control. But what we can control is our reaction to it. So to your point, it's not the event. It's the meaning we put behind it. It's the emotion we put into it and how we react to it. And can we control that?
Got to clean it up.
Please.
It's not the emotion we put into it. The meaning causes the emotion.
The emotion. Great point. Love it. That's really great. So there's that side of the equation that we look at, and it boils it again down to there is probably some form. What's your well, this would go down a whole different rabbit hole, so I don't necessarily need to. But my observation over the years, of course, is that these are also habits that we have. They're a way of being. It's an operating system that says, when something happens, we blow up, we get emotional, there's drama attached to it. There's also, those are habits that we create, I think, based on that belief, based on that we feel we don't have any control over how we respond. These things are happening to us. It's interesting that also there's a question that often gets back to where we kind of started early on in this conversation, Shelly, is that one of the things that I coach with real estate investors, when deals go bad for whatever reason, people will often say, why did this happen to me? And we go back to the quality of questions. And I say, why don't you try reframing that question as an example and say, how did this happen for me? So that you're looking at it from a totally different perspective. How did this happen for me, as opposed to why did this happen to me? They take you down, those two questions take you down totally different paths.
That's great. Yeah.
And it is really a fundamental, is that when an event happens, back to what you say, the meaning we give it then has to be, I think, and I'd like your thought on this as we wind up, is that now it's about the question you ask yourself as you look at what's happened and as you look at that event and the meaning that you give it. Would a point of entry be? What would be a question we might ask ourselves in that case?
What meaning am I giving the event? I mean, for me, that's the most powerful question. And what else could it mean? Then you can go to a...
I guess you go back to this, and we don't need to beat it to death. I think, reading your book and following you on that website, and we'll put that link in the description. But I guess first off, you have to look at it and go, what meaning am I giving it? So you have to be reflective enough or self-aware enough to say, why am I pissed off? Why am I emotional? Why am I crying? Whatever the story is, whatever that reaction is, you have to be aware enough of going, okay, this needs to stop. And I have to ask myself, what meaning am I giving this? So to your point is that you asked that question, what meaning am I giving it? But first we have to say,
you keep saying it. Everybody says it. What meaning am I giving it? And that's very amorphous. It's like, well, what's it? Right? Like you said a couple of times, it's something, it's the meaning you give. I don't know what it is. What happens is there's two things. There's issues you want to get rid of. Go eliminate beliefs. That will get rid of your issues, right? I'm a very simple girl. People make things very complex. And I think again, the things we're talking about, get rid of your problems, get rid of your beliefs, get rid of your problems. In the moment, if you have an emotion, an emotion you don't want, you're angry, you're anxious, you're sad, you want to get rid of that emotion, ask yourself the question, what happened? So it is the event. What happened? Somebody said something, somebody did something, something happened, something didn't happen, but something happened right before you had that emotion. What happened? What meaning did I give the event?
Got it.
What happened?
Mm-hmm.
And then come up with one other possible meaning so that your brain shifts, breaks it up. Like, well, it could mean that, but it also could mean this. Somebody walked by and didn't say hello. It could mean they don't like me, and it could mean they're distracted or they're shy or they're thinking about something else. Just come up with one and then get the event has no meaning. I don't know anything for sure because it happened ever.
Mm.
And if you do that, then the emotion dissolves. When we have a course called the Occurring Course. When we get to number 10, so Rodney, who works for me for 20 years, is very stoic. He's very cerebral. He's brilliant. He's at number 10, Occurring Course. He and I cry because people are like gurus. Like, I don't fight with my wife anymore. I don't yell at people at work anymore. I don't, I'm just, I use a term, I won't say it on the air. I don't know, some podcasts I just spit it out, but the word is unfuckable with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, nobody can get me.
Yeah, I love that.
You just can't make me feel anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's freedom. It's freedom because you're not at the effect. You're not a victim. Because when other things make you feel something, you're a victim. But when you have the power to know how you feel and don't feel, when you can get rid of those feelings, it's very powerful. It's really, really a cool thing.
I love it. Shelly, when we first started this podcast, we knew we had limited time. You had suggested that sometimes we go over with you. And of course, we're only barely scratching the surface of this very profound conversation. But I do want to say thank you for what you've shared today, for your time and the energy and the guidance. And I hope we can cross paths again soon, do a part 2. I think it would be very interesting and our listeners would love it. So thank you so much for your time. One of the questions that I often ask my guests, a number of questions, but for you today to finish this off, what are you grateful for today, Shelly?
Oh, God, I am grateful for my life. I am grateful for my health. I am grateful that I was invited on your podcast. I am grateful for my children. I'm grateful that I get up every day, I think, with health and friends and a full life. I am so grateful.
Beautiful. And I am grateful to have had the opportunity to meet you. Like you, I am so grateful for my life, my wife, my family. And thanks for joining me on the podcast, Shelly. And I look forward to speaking with you again real soon.
Thanks for having me. It was great fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. If you found value in the podcast, please take the time to rate and review and share with others. Share with your friends. As it is my goal to always improve and to provide the highest value for you, the listener. If you have any comments, suggestions, or questions you'd like answered, please email me at ceo@reincanada.com. That's ceo@reincanada.com. I look forward to hearing from you. And until next time, Patrick out.